KNON 89.3 FM in Dallas and Fort Worth, the voice of the people.
Business owners, tell KNON's listeners about your business. You can put your business or event on KNON. KNON currently has space available to run announcements for you. Tell KNON's listeners about your goods, services, nightclub, concert, or event. Help keep the voice of the people on the air while putting your information on the air. KNON's been named the #1 radio station in Dallas by both the Dallas Observer and D Magazine. Put your business with Dallas's #1 station. Call now for more information at 214-828-9500, extension 227, or extension 233. For more information, go to KNON.org and click on the Run Spots on KNON page. It's a great way for your business to support community radio while letting more people know about you.
Get off my lawn.
Watergate! Watergate!
Jim Schutze with Get Off My Lawn. Jim Schutze here with Get Off My Lawn. Back from a week's unintended absence. Good to be back. I'm battling some allergies, so if you hear a sound like someone assaulting an old lady, that will be me sneezing. We may need a little mic adjustment. I think it's kind of loud here, but we'll figure it out. We're struggling along this weekend. Good to be here. I'm honored to have with me as a guest Philip Kingston, the newly elected City Council representative from District 14.
Hey, Jim.
Thanks for coming.
Absolutely.
I have this reflexive tendency to describe District 14 as East Dallas, which is not right.
There's a huge section of it that's west of 75, and frankly, the most vibrant section in terms of economic development, for sure.
More vibrant than my street?
Even more vibrant than your street. We won't reveal where that street is because of security concerns, obviously.
Yeah, right. That District 14 has traditionally been a pivotal district and one with a lot of complicated politics and it was Angela Hunt's district, excuse me, back in the day, Lee Simpson's district, and it's a great vantage point, I've always thought, from which to look at the rest of the council. You're sort of I think it's a focal district, and you're required from that position to deal with the whole council. You don't get to be a member of anybody else's big posse, exactly, right?
It's up to me to build the posse for each individual issue.
And I was hopeful that Councilman Kingston could just sort of give us a preview. We're going into a new council, a new 2 years, and I wonder what the big issues are that you see on the horizon.
Well, Jim, I'm not complaining about this, but it is sort of funny to me that if I do a good job and the people of District 14 keep me, then I'll go off the council in 2021, which is sort of terrifying to me to think about. But it will be, if I accomplish many things and I'm the best council person for that district ever, which it is a high bar, I will still probably not make a decision more important than in the first 6 or 8 months hiring a new city manager for the city of Dallas. And so that's kind of interesting. We'll be hit with the most important decision of the new council right up front. We're also hiring a new city attorney. It's a huge issue, an underrated issue, frankly. I think people don't understand how important that job is. And those two issues are going to be incredibly important and way early, and there are going to be 5 freshmen dealing with them, and there's a lot of I don't know, I put a lot of thought into it, and it's going to be interesting.
Yeah, and of course that's an open process that you'll I'm sure are participating in an aggressive activist fashion all the time. How does it work?
Well, I would say it's not an open process. I'm actually somewhat upset. Apparently what we're doing in terms of manager search is the staff issued a request for proposal that limits the fee on a manager search to $50,000. Now, if we can get away with finding a great manager for $50,000, I'm on board. But I represent some search firms, and I happen to know that the standard deal is anywhere between 25 and 33% of the candidate's first year salary.
So that would put it
90 to 120. I don't know. And the other thing is this is Dallas is a premier manager job.
Yeah.
There's only one city in the country with a larger population that uses the council manager form of government. We ought to have every viable candidate considered for this job. And currently what we see is that the process apparently is being managed in-house in the manager's office by someone who is purportedly a candidate for the position. And that's really strange to me. That doesn't seem like a credible way to find the best candidates.
Well, in terms of the money, in other words, if you're limiting the money to that amount, the big search firms are not going to be interested in the job.
That's my assumption. Now, I've heard that we have some search firms who are interested, and if I'm wrong, I'm happy to be wrong. I mean, if we're going to save money and we're apparently, I don't know, if we're so attractive that people will cut their rates in order to work for us, then great, I'm happy with that. All I want is to make sure that we're getting a look at every possible viable candidate for this office.
Theoretically, you don't have to limit yourselves to people who are already in the city management profession. You could look for attorneys, you could look for lots of different kinds of people, you could look for a former elected office holder. So what do you know about what kind of people are being looked at?
I think you're right about that, Jim, in general, but I think that Dallas and large council manager cities are so complex that you really need somebody who's at least had a tour of duty in management before you hand the reins over. I would be a little bit nervous to hand it to somebody who's a complete outsider. But I think that what I'm hopeful of is that we will look at strong internal candidates, and I think we probably have at least a couple, and that we will also look at people who have had a great record of success in similarly sized cities, or people who are real overachievers in smaller cities using council manager form of government.
Of course, it's always been my impression, I think it's more than just an impression, that over time, somebody who holds the office as long as the incumbent, Mary Soom, has developed very strong relationships out in the city. I would call those political relationships. There are people over time who develop kind of a channel into the city manager's office that's inevitable. And so one of the things we might think of in a kind of hoping for a new broom that would sweep clean would be to look for candidates who will not have those relationships, candidates from outside. So how much input, I mean, do you think that's all irrelevant? If it's not irrelevant, how much input are you and the council able to have toward encouraging the search committee to look outside for people who do not bring these relationships to the job with them already formed?
Well, to start with your first point about the sort of political relationships that a manager might develop, that's true, but I think those could be positive or negative. And I think when you'll hear people advocate for an internal candidate, they'll advocate for preserving the kind of institutional knowledge and relationships that already exist. I think the counter-argument is not so much doing away with negative political relationships, it's looking at things with fresh eyes, coming to a job without preconceived notions of what's possible and impossible. But in terms of how we encourage the search committee, I actually don't know. I have to tell you, I don't know. There's a search committee that Mayor Rawlings named. I don't know if they've met. I don't know what their rubric is for evaluating candidates. I don't know how they came up with the $50,000 number, although I note that that's a figure that is $1 short of needing council approval, so maybe that's how we came to that number. I don't know. I found out about the request for proposal from a reporter.
That seems unbelievable. There, as you've already said, excuse me, there simply is no more important decision that the council can make right now.
Well, and at some point, I assume somebody's going to come ask for my vote for one or another candidate. And, it seems like if you want my vote, you probably ought to brief me.
Who's on the committee?
I'm trying to think. I think it's Dwayne Caraway and... I'm going to mess this up, Jim.
Is Hill on?
I can't remember if Von Seal's on or not.
I thought she was. And who else?
I'm blanking on the third one.
What's the protocol? There's nothing in the charter about a search committee.
There is nothing in the charter about a search committee. The charter says the council hires the manager.
Right.
And to me, that means the council as a whole body. I can understand appointing a smaller committee of the council to manage some details, but honestly, are there details of a council manager search that are beneath the consideration of the full council? I don't really think so. I don't think this is a huge. I don't think this is a really fraught question or has a bunch of details that the board level people don't need to consider. I'd sort of like this to just be out in the open at the Horseshoe. Everybody has a seat at the table. Everybody gets input on who we want as our chief executive for the city.
The question would be, the problem is, who else on the council? I'm not asking you to name names, but do you sense any level of concern or urgency or focus on this in the rest of the council?
Yes, there are many members of council who, I actually think that if you polled council on a general basis and said, what do you want for the next manager, you would get a bunch of pretty similar sounding answers in terms of, we want the best candidate, we want somebody who's strong and who has great management skills and fresh ideas and all that stuff. We're going to disagree on who that person is, obviously, but I think the general theory of who we're looking for, we have some commonalities on council. Now, whether my colleagues share my view that we really need to be expansive in our search, I don't know. I haven't talked to each of them about this, but I feel sure that I'm not the only one who wants to be involved.
Yeah. What are the chances procedurally? This is a freight train that's already rolling down the tracks, right? Is there any way to alter or get in and have an influence on the...
One thing I will say is when I started running for council September of last year, I made it a point every time I met with anybody, in fact, you and I talked about it when we met months ago, to ask each person who they thought would be good for a city manager, what they were looking for, and how we ought to go about searching. And I will say that I think that particularly the business community, which is a very important constituency in Dallas, is going to absolutely throw a fit if they perceive that there has not been a credible national search. Now, that doesn't mean they're going to oppose an internal candidate if that person is the best person for the job, but it does mean that if we don't do a credible job of looking, we are going to have significant public opposition to whatever the plan is.
And by the way, I was just sort of randomly consulting my computer-like memory for all of these details, and it just occurred.
That was that steel trap noise.
Yeah, that was that text message noise, which told me that the committee is Sheffy Cadane, Dwayne Caraway, and Monica Alonso. So, you mentioned the business community as a constituency that's going to want to see a credible national search. From the outside looking in, it looks to me like this is a fixed deal to make sure it's an internal candidate.
And I want to be careful about saying that, Jim. You can make that conclusion. This could be perfectly appropriate. Maybe this turns out candidates that are just great and we're going to have everything we need. I just have serious questions about it, and my questions arise in part because I haven't been consulted.
Yeah. It sounds like a Dick Cheney search. A little bit. Hey, I found somebody. Me. Well, that's very, very interesting. What's the next shoe to fall procedurally? What do we expect in it?
Again, I don't know. And if I had more knowledge about this, maybe I would feel a little bit better about it.
It's so bizarre. It's almost like the why don't we just send monks out into the villages and see if they can discover the newborn?
I actually think maybe we ought to go down to Lake Cliff Park and see if there's some woman with a sword standing in the middle of the lake. Perhaps we're going about this all the wrong way.
Yeah. Well, so I have another question. I want to remind listeners, we want to hear from you too. We're at 972-647-1893, 972-647-1893, the phone number that I can remember for 10 minutes. And give us a call. If you have thoughts about this, we're talking to Philip Kingston, from the newly elected representative from District 14. I started off saying that it always seems to me that District 14 is pivotal in a lot of ways, and you mentioned that you have to go out and put together your own coalitions. I'm not asking you to talk about intimate political detail here on the air, but what do coalitions look like? What are the opportunities out there?
Well, and I am very optimistic about opportunities like that. One thing I've learned already on council is that the members of council are not stereotypes. They're not, in Dwayne's words, cartoons.
Yeah.
They're real people with differing ideas on different topics. I think that there are, at times, people may tend to stereotype, the District 14 representative is this wild-eyed East Dallas neighborhood weirdo. And probably I am, but and maybe sometimes we stereotype Southern Dallas as being focused on a specific set of issues, or monolithic, which I think is a huge mistake. Those representatives are highly independent of each other. Not that they have conflict, but they don't always agree. And we had one meeting before we went on break for a month, which is kind of a cruel thing to do to freshman members. But in any case, one of the issues that came up was Carolyn Davis and Dwayne Caraway are very concerned about the way the city sells foreclosed properties, and they go to people who, at least in the eyes of our representatives, don't improve the neighborhoods when they come in. So Dwayne and Tom Perkins, our city attorney, was trying to explain to Dwayne that that's all set forth by state law, and we can't look into the intentions of the buyer before we sell the property to them. And Dwayne, kind of got frustrated with Tom and looked at him and said, "You're the lawyer, figure it out." And I thought that was the greatest thing I'd ever heard, because that's exactly what our constituents want from each council member. That's what my clients want from me when I'm practicing law. They just want me to figure it out. They want a good outcome. So I leaned over to Dwayne later and I said, "I got an idea for this." And he and I worked on a memo that we sent down to the manager's office that I think we'll get some response to look at maybe doing a tax abatement incentive for people to use their properties in specific ways once they buy them out of our land bank.
That's really interesting. We did chat about this a little bit before the show. There are all kinds of mechanisms that the city has experimented with in the past, land banking and so on. It does seem like there ought to be some way you can, some program you can devise, or incentive, as you suggest, that does a little better than just flipping the stuff to those courthouse steps guys who are going to rent them out at the bare minimal standards.
Sure there is. And I had a meeting the other day with MetroTex Association of Realtors, which is our local Texas Association of Realtors group. And I mentioned this issue to them, and they represent people who buy those properties. And they said, yeah, absolutely, there are ways to incentivize those people to use the properties in specific ways. So if we start to get some buy-in from private industry on this, that, I think, I mean, in Dallas in the last 20 years, what have we experienced is when private industry and our city government work together, we get really good outcomes in a lot of ways. And if they can develop stuff that's acceptable to their membership, to their clients, then I think that becomes a potential for a real win-win. I've got to develop a better word than win-win for these things.
But you're right. What always makes me nervous about it. Oh, here we go. We're here. This is the sad music that means that we have to leave you for a few seconds. We'll be back later.
Time to pay the bills.
Yeah. See you in a minute. We're going to take a break.
Tornadoes, wildfires, hurricanes, news of catastrophes creates a need for volunteers. The Mass Care Task Force is a volunteer group that helps after these catastrophes. The Mass Care Task Force is a collaboration of the American Red Cross, the Salvation Army, the North Texas Food Bank, and the Volunteer Center of North Texas. Become a pre-trained disaster volunteer who is ready to help before disaster strikes. For more information on becoming a disaster volunteer, the website is forcefortexas.com. A message from KNON and the Mass Care Task Force.
When they're gone for good. This is Scott from KNON's Texas Blues Radio telling you don't miss out on some great blues. KNON's Texas Blues Radio Volume 5 Blues CD. It's a CD put together by real blues fans for real blues fans like you. Texas Blues Radio Volume 5 features great local blues from Michael J. and the Paul Bird Band, JJ and the Detonators, the Chris Watson Band, the Two Tones, Rough Cut Blues Band, Jeff Stone with Charlie Love, Dave Millsap, Sirloin and the Ass Kicking Machine, Tutu Jones, Blues Boy Bo, Buddy Whittington, Andrea Dawson, Kirkland James, Sonny Colley, and Johnny Red and the Roosters. Get a copy now at Forever Young Records in Grand Prairie, Record Town in Fort Worth, and in Dallas at Bill's Records. This is a Dallas Blues collector's item. A very limited amount of vinyl copies can be found at Forever Young Records, the sponsor of this great blues project. CD downloads are available at cdbaby.com. Whether you get it as a download, on vinyl, or on CD, all the proceeds will benefit KNON. For more info on Texas Blues Radio Volume 5, visit knon.org.
Jim Schutze back with Get Off My Lawn. We've got all of our lead-in music queued up, and and I'm here with Philip Kingston, the City Council representative from District 14. We've been talking about the year ahead on the council and important issues. Mr. Kingston's talked about the city manager search, which is pretty baffling news, frankly. I didn't realize that this thing was underway and that the council knew so little about it. And then we have this parallel matter of the fact that we're looking for a new city attorney as well. Mr. Perkins is leaving.
And Jim, I think that search is underrated in terms of public attention because it's such a huge job. We have more than 90 attorneys in-house in the attorney's office at the City of Dallas, which makes it one of the largest law firms in town. Mm-hmm. And they have a huge brief of things that they have to handle. It's a big department because there are a lot of important legal jobs in the city. But the city attorney is one of the few positions that council hires directly, and that person is supposed to be representing council as a whole body and really council's representative on all legal matters, including dealings with staff. Mm-hmm. And that's it's a huge hire. It's something, Tom Perkins, he was not a political guy in terms of trying to be in the public light or anything, and I think that's appropriate for that's the right choice there. But we need to make sure that we're getting somebody who's going to make sure we're getting good legal service at the City of Dallas. And I think at times we have not gotten good legal service in Dallas. Mm-hmm. It's something that is sort of a natural issue for me because I'm sensitive to whether we're getting good legal service.
And you're an attorney.
So it's something I'm focusing on. Scott Griggs is on that search committee. Von Sil Jones Hill is on that committee, and I think Delia Hasso was on it, and it's now they need to replace that member on the search committee.
Right.
But that one, I believe we've had. I wasn't on council when they approved the search, but I believe that the council has actually been briefed on that one. We've hired a search firm that I actually am familiar with, and so I have some confidence in their abilities. And they actually are meeting with all members of council to get their input on what we should be looking for in a city attorney.
Well, this is an interesting contrast. I mean, if you can be met with and if that search can be discussed.
Well, and maybe I'm being premature and whining about not being consulted on the manager search. Maybe somebody's going to come to me at some point, but it'd be nice to know that.
Right. I don't know. Does the city attorney have jurisdiction over the city's sort of prosecutorial city courts enforcement division? Is that part of his?
Absolutely.
Oh.
So yeah, you have that aspect. You have defense of our police officers when they're accused of civil rights violations. That's huge. There's the real estate questions that come up to the city of Dallas are just amazing.
Right.
I mean, it really is a big job. I am interested in two things. I'm interested in an attorney, going back to Dwayne's comment to Tom the other day, you're the attorney, figure it out.
Yeah.
I'm interested in somebody who is a problem solver, who can be presented with a complex problem and find a strategic solution. And I'm also very much interested in someone who's a strategic risk manager, someone who can see the big picture, see years down the road where the city has potential for risk, where it has potential for gain, and can help us. I think the primary benefit of a good lawyer is good strategy.
Yeah. When we were talking about foreclosed properties before, I was thinking in the back of my mind that there's an aspect of this that's always made me nervous, because in the past there has been pressure to combine the enforcement activities of the city with other just every kind of police power you can imagine, to, in a sense, push off responsibility for law enforcement on property owners. We had a mobilization in the past called the SAFE Team. I think some of that still goes on. And the idea was that if you own an apartment complex, it's up to you to end crime in your neighborhood, which is an interesting concept. And I always had a certain respect for Perkins, because I thought that while he was under pressure to do this, he did act as kind of a cautionary break on some of it.
And that's a really appropriate thing for an attorney to do, is to say, look, you're out of your skis here.
Yeah, the lawyer's got to tell you sometimes that actually, no, you that's not your TV set, so you can't have it.
Seems like a simple concept.
Yeah, and it seemed to me that Perkins was good at that. But when we talk about stuff like dealing with foreclosed property and putting in, and we talk about these bad guys who buy it and don't do anything with it, we do have to be a little careful of property rights, right? And how heavily we tread.
We have to be incredibly careful, and frankly, avoiding those sort of nuisance laws where you're coming in on. The one I remember is that motel over on Harry Hines, where he'd had, I don't know, 6 drug busts in a year, and suddenly they were going to try to take his property from him. That's kind of heavy-handed, which was why Dwayne and I were thinking in terms of an incentive as opposed to a regulatory whip. The carrot often is better than the stick. Not that either needs to be neglected, but in this instance, we want a certain outcome. We need to incentivize private property owners to give it to us.
Look, we've got a caller, Tony, on line 4. Tony, are you still there?
Good morning. How y'all doing this morning?
Good. How are you?
Hey, Tony.
What's
All
up?
right. Everything sounds good. Everything sounds kosher, but it's almost like, you're forgetting about the citizen council, forgetting about the South-North divide.
Right.
I mean, the conversation sounds perfect, and I mean, everything sounds honest.
Yeah.
But the meat of it is this. What we're going to do with this, making this whole city one, rather than both sides. My thing is this. He's only one council person, and he has to deal with that racial issue. And I want to hear that concept and that complex conversation happen. Thank you.
Tony, I think you raise an excellent point, and let me ask Councilman Kingston, what is the picture? Let's forget about just city council politics and sort of look out into what we might call the real world, the rest of the city. There's always been this. I've sensed this divide. I've never been able to exactly explain it fully to myself, but between, for example, the neighborhoods in East Dallas, where I live and you live, where there's been a resurgence and this whole movement to improve the neighborhoods and to protect them against corrosive forms of development, and Southern Dallas and West Dallas. Why has that division been there, and is that ever going to change?
Well, Jim, I'm a student of Dallas history like you are, and we know that there have been institutional forms of not just neglect but actual abuse of Southern and Western Dallas neighborhoods. We had I'm getting some kind of echo. Okay, it's better. One of the things we talked about is these foreclosed properties, and whether there's always the danger when you're going in and tearing down houses or whatever we're doing that you've gone back into slum clearance.
Well, yeah.
I mean, you remember?
Yeah.
And that's damaging to neighborhoods. But one thing I would say is that what I see in terms of the East Dallas neighborhoods, which are sort of, you had your urban pioneers go in and sort of restore houses,
right.
And then following along was the movement for historic preservation, which I've been a part of, and I think it's very important. That could be seen as, affluent people doing things in a part of town that doesn't affect Western and Southern Dallas. I see it differently. I see those people as really strong neighborhood people, and I think one of the things that Western and Southern Dallas need more than anything else is better, stronger neighborhood organizations. And I know that there are people who you might characterize as the affluent East Dallas folks who have worked very hard on helping Western and Southern Dallas neighborhoods build those institutions so that they have a better voice at City Hall, so that they can demand better services, so that they can demand better public safety, all the things that we East Dallas is full of squeaky wheels, right?
Sure.
Well, we can train others to be just as squeaky as we are. And one of the things that's coming up is the Dallas Homeowners League's boot camp is going to be on August 10th this year. And the new president of that organization is Eloy Trevino, who's a guy who's a Kessler guy. He's not, he doesn't come from a blighted neighborhood, but
right.
he's worked very hard to organize, for instance, the La Bajada neighborhood at the western end of the Margaret Hunt Hill Bridge. That is, I think there's a natural affinity there of neighborhood people all across the city, and that's if we're looking for things that we can agree on and work on together, I think that's one area where neighborhood people can help each other.
That's really, really interesting, because I carry around this burden of ancient history. And I remember back when State Thomas, Short North Dallas, that whole district was being erased, and the Dallas Homeowners League lifted not a finger. It didn't. I don't think they got it. I don't think they saw it. It wasn't on their radar. So La Bajada was a very different story, because La Bajada had a big bullseye on it. At one point, La Bajada could be scraped as we sit here right now if it hadn't been for that organization effort. And I don't think I understood that there was a Dallas Homeowners League component in organizing La Bajada to defend it. We're talking about the neighborhood that is right at the foot of the Calatrava fake suspension bridge. I'm sorry, the Margaret Hunt Hill Bridge. And it's an old West Dallas Latino neighborhood, mainly single-family home ownership, been there for a long time, and there was a group of developers who would have loved to get into at least one end of that neighborhood and blow it down and rezone it for whatever. And it was able to be organized and defend itself, which, as I say, was a big contradiction of and reversal of some unfortunate stuff we've seen in the past. But I didn't know DHL, they were part of that? Or?
Absolutely, yeah. And I guess I should disclose my wife is on the board of DHL, so I'm perhaps more of a cheerleader than I ought to be. And, criticisms of its historical actions or inactions may be valid, but I think that what you see is a reinvigorated Dallas Homeowners League that is specifically focused not only on serving affluent East Dallas neighborhoods, but also on really trying to develop and support neighborhood associations in Western and Southern Dallas.
And the city has just changed. When I go way back, when the DHL, before it was even East Dallas, when it was really a North Dallas organization, and the city has just changed since then. You know, people, a new, younger breed of people with a different set of experiences are in the saddle now, and that makes a big difference.
And, you know, the organizations do change with changes in personnel. I mean, that's what we're talking about with the manager search and with the attorney search. There's going to be a change, really, whether we want one or not. We're going to get change. And it's important, I think, to make sure that your brain doesn't become calcified so that you can't recognize a change in an organization and an opportunity to work together.
Mm-hmm. There's something out there that's...
I wasn't accusing you of calcification. I'm just saying, in general, we need to not calcify.
Well, I actually need more calcification. I take tablets for that, as a matter of fact. But there is something out there that there's a huge potential. When Tony asks what brings the city together, there's this stuff happening in East Dallas. There's this stuff happening in Southern Dallas. There's this stuff happening in North Oak Cliff, and in excuse me, Lake Highlands and North Dallas has its concerns. We have all these people who are doing things and building all over the city. It would be great if there were a way to unify some of those themes. And Tony's right that race has been a big part of what's hobbled us.
Tony is not wrong about the racial issue. I will say, Tony, that I have not seen it so far. I mean, I haven't been on the council that long. I haven't been confronted by an issue that I thought really had a negative racial component to it. Obviously, we're going to continue to have those issues. Until people feel like that their race makes no difference in the opportunities that they're given, then we continue to need to deal with it.
Right.
But so far, so good. Let's keep our fingers crossed. And I think we've seen in the past couple of years, issues that could have turned into really negative racial problems have sort of been diffused. I'm thinking of the foot chase and the shooting that Dallas Police Department had a year and a half ago, and they revised their foot chase rules, and that could have turned ugly, and it really didn't.
That's right. Sure.
We had what was the protests of the Korean-owned convenience store? And okay, obviously people had their feelings hurt, but at the end of the day, we didn't have violence.
Yeah.
The business is still there.
Right.
I don't see how it could have turned way worse than it did.
Yeah. The big tough one right now is the school system. And aren't you glad that's not on your plate directly? But schools are, awfully important to the city. I'm sure you would agree.
Absolutely. And it's kind of interesting. City Council doesn't have a direct way of affecting the way DISD works, but it's if you don't realize that it's your problem, then you really are only perpetuating the problems in the system. And so I've tried to make sure that I'm available to Mike Morath as my DISD trustee to make sure that he knows that issues that he's going to confront, which currently are like early post neonatal parental education, that's something that the city's going to help and support.
We'll be back after this break. Get off my lawn.
If it's time to get rid of your old gas guzzler, the Knon Vehicle Donation Program can help. There's still a market for those old vehicles, and if you donate it, you're helping to support quality programming here on KNON. Just call 877-KNON-AUTO or go online to knon.org. We'll take care of everything from pickup to tax paperwork. That's 877-KNON-AUTO or online at knon.org.
Hey, babes, take one.
Jim Schutze back with the final and definitive segment of Get Off My Lawn. Sitting here with Michael Kingston.
Or Philip Kingston.
Philip Kingston.
You did that to me in the Observer one time.
That's right. I did that. Actually, yeah, I was just kidding. I did that on purpose. Philip Kingston. And we've been talking about what's coming up at the City Council. He's been telling me about all these good things that can happen. You do understand that this would put me out of business if you just start doing good stuff and agreeing with each other and having all this kumbaya. I need something to write about.
What, you want to talk about Museum Tower?
No, I think we disagree about that. I think you're soft on the Nasher, if I'm not. Am I incorrect about this?
I like to think that I am very pragmatic and that I lean neither way. I mean, I think everybody wants to have a neighborhood that works together, that includes Museum Tower.
Yeah.
And I think everybody wants to protect the pension fund for our public safety professionals. That's a basis for working together. Obviously, the mechanical issue of what do you do about the glare is the thing that everybody's focused on as a problem. But I think if we focus on the things that are common goals, we may come to a better solution.
And I'm soft on the Nasher. I think the Nasher Sculpture Museum is wonderful. It's great. It's an enormous asset. Ray Nasher did this city a huge favor by endowing us with that, with his collection and with the other works that have been brought there. I'm so confused about it, though. Look, maybe this is beyond both of our pay grades, but they have these little things on top of the
oculi.
The oculi, and they're pointed at the shiny building. They're pointed at the museum tower. Can't they just point them in another direction?
No. They can't. Okay, here's and I don't know this.
Okay.
I mean, I'm not an engineer, but no, apparently. Okay, first of all, let's talk about what the Nasher is. It's a building on the southern side of the lot that it's on.
Right.
And then it is a huge garden closer to Will Rogers, right? Okay, well, how does changing the roof protect the garden?
I've heard very different opinions about the exposure of the garden. that the story that the reflection from the building is incinerating the garden is not necessarily established fact, and it can have to do with planting the wrong stuff. But go ahead.
Well, they've got dead spots in the grass, so unless they're letting dogs pee there, I don't know what's going on with that.
Yeah.
But in any case, the oculi, this is what I've been told, the oculi were meant to give us northern light. You know, in art, you want the northern light at all times because it has no direct sunlight. It's more even. There are 100 reasons for it that I don't really get because my artistic education ended in 5th grade.
Yeah.
But from what I understand from the Nasher folks, the proposed new oculi simply don't work. They wind up being pointed either at the sun or still at the shiny building. That there's been no engineering solution that actually preserves the light that they used to have.
Oh. Well, so I guess they just got to tear that building down.
I actually think that there are some other solutions that might work. I, for instance, suggested a giant sail shade between the two buildings, and I don't know why that idea didn't catch fire.
Right. Well, yeah. Yeah, who knows? It certainly is. The other thing I wonder about it is that why don't they just take it to court?
Well, I think that you have actually a lot of responsible people, and I may get some grief from my colleagues for saying this, my legal colleagues.
Yeah.
Lawsuits are typically not the most optimal solution to problems.
Yeah.
If you can reach a solution that doesn't involve a lawsuit, I think that that's probably a better idea. And I think that there still exists some impetus on both sides to reach a harmonious solution rather than a knockdown dragout. And a knockdown dragout's going to take forever. And courts are very bad at giving people what they want.
Sure.
You tend to get some sort of rough justice. It's not what you would have scripted out for yourself at the beginning of the process. So I'm actually encouraged that everyone seems to be avoiding the courthouse.
Yeah, and I've devoted a great deal of my own life to avoiding the courthouse, and so I don't know why I want somebody else to go there. And I see what you're saying. I agree with you that that's probably a last-ditch solution. The only part of it that sort of gets on my nerves is the use of the morning news and D Magazine. You know, the people who run the Nasher have got a pretty strong grip on local establishment media, and this painting of Museum Tower is a tower of evil, an expression of wickedness. I have trouble with that. I also can't stand it in this last appeal that was on the op-ed page of the news this week. There was this assertion that the whole world is watching. I don't think that's true.
Well, it depends on what world you live in, Jim.
Yeah, certainly.
When the architecture section of the New York Times runs a story on it, people who are involved in architecture and city planning and the arts, that's their world, and the world at that point is watching for them. And so I had some sympathy for that assertion. The other thing that's going on is there, and you have written about this critically, I think, there is a sensitivity in this town to what's going to happen at the 50th anniversary of the JFK assassination.
Yeah.
And if we're having this sort of internecine fight down there in the jewel of our arts district, then that seems less than awesome when we have international visitors coming to town.
Okay, you brought up the 50th anniversary. I wasn't going to touch it. But yes, I have been writing about it. I just got interviewed yesterday, part of a documentary that's being made about all this, and there are a bunch of them in the works. There are Hollywood movies in the works. And it just seems to me that the city is setting itself up for such a thrashing by trying to keep a boot on the neck of this celebration. I mean, there are very important...
Celebration might be the wrong word. I'm not sure.
Yeah, observation, commemoration, whatever it is, funeral service. There are really important issues of a right to assembly, free speech, the fact that this is an event in national and world history. It doesn't really belong to us. The city doesn't own this, and this whole business with this committee shutting down Dealey Plaza for 2 weeks, handing out tickets that you have to get in. Oh my God, they've got security measures that far exceed what we do for a presidential visit.
I got a memo about how I get tickets the other day, Jim. Do you think I should distribute my tickets to some people with some specific points of view?
Yes. People wearing only body paint. It just, and I don't get where it comes from. The worst part is that, for me, the security concerns are transparently being exploited as a way of keeping certain people out of Dealey Plaza. Why on earth can't the committee do whatever it wants to do for an hour and a half, whatever? They're going to have a naval chorus and fighter jets flying over. How that's consonant with the legacy of JFK, I don't know. But do whatever they want to do, and then get out of there and let other people occupy Dealey Plaza. What's wrong with that?
Well, it's going to happen it's going to happen one way or another. I mean, the people who have a differing view from, well, and I don't even know what the view of the city is, but people who have a differing view from whatever's going to be presented in the official commemoration, they're going to wind up in Dealey Plaza eventually. They're either going to do it before or after, you know. And I think it's completely pointless to try to exclude them from an area during some certain period of time.
Yep, but the period of time is 2 weeks. It's a week on either side of the event.
Do you think that we are going to be successful, just as a pragmatic matter, in excluding people from that area for 2 weeks? I don't think anybody could keep me out of there for 2 hours.
And I think what's going to be attracted to this event will be a bunch of people who are spoiling for a fight.
I think you're right.
So why do?
Well, this is solely history according to Philip Kingston, so it's worth every penny you paid for it. But to my view, everyone in the world seems to want to enforce some kind of narrative on the story of the assassination of John Kennedy.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't make any sense, and our brains hate things that don't make sense.
Right.
My personal view is it doesn't make sense, and unless somebody can reanimate the parties that were living then and look inside their brains, we're never going to get a cohesive narrative of what happened. The city's trying to present one thing. There are other, Mr. Grodin might want to present a different view. I might want to present my own view. But I just think it's not, even Mr. Marcus's view, I think, is an attempt to enforce a narrative on facts that don't really fit a narrative.
I was in, last week I was in Montana at a family reunion that was not a reunion of my family, but it's a family I was close to as a young man, so I was invited. And there were people there who'd gathered from all over the country. And we were sitting around talking, and I mentioned some of this, and I said that, there was great sensitivity about the event in Dallas on the 50th. And somebody said, "Oh, Dallas is having an event?" And I said, "Yeah." And they said, "Why?" And I realized it's not. It doesn't occur to most people that the center of focus is here anyway. Kennedy didn't live his life here. All he did here was get shot. And I don't know. I see it as an expression, and it's interesting to me that you mentioned it in the same breath with the Nasher thing.
Well, because that's driving. I wouldn't mention it if it didn't matter. It's driving policy decisions in this city for whatever reason. I'm not saying that's good or bad. And if we can't have public discourse about it, and that's, I think, one of the things you're being critical of, is public discourse is this messy thing that happens in Dealey Plaza.
Yeah.
Then I don't know. I think the reason we're having something, the answer to the question why, is to not have something might appear to be hypersensitive.
Right.
And the city was truly unfairly characterized as the city of hate, and there's just, the facts don't bear that out at all. I think that's bunk. But if we just sort of ignored it or put our heads in the sand, I think we might be characterized as hypersensitive.
Yeah, that's true. But if we have a ring of cops around Dealey Plaza,
we also look hypersensitive.
Yeah, in a very bad way. That's going to remind people of 1963. I think that's what's the most unfortunate part of it. But anyway, that's sort of a detour for us. Just happens to be one of my obsessions.
Well, it's your show.
Yeah. On a more positive light, before we got off on this, I think I heard you saying, don't let me put words in your mouth, but that you see opportunities for coalition on this council.
Absolutely.
And especially, it's really interesting to hear you talking about that in terms of neighborhoods. Neighborhoods always seem to me this fundamentally important issue that doesn't have a sexy promontory like the Calatrava Bridge.
Right. I'm struggling with how to do the marketing and branding on streets and drainage.
Yeah. But I have a neighbor who's very conservative politically, and probably 10 years ago, I saw him out in front of his house. He had this horrendous pothole in the street in front of his house. It had been there, the pothole had been there for 10 years, and it just kept getting worse. And he was staring into this pothole, and I walked by, and he looked at me, and he said, "You know what? I've supported City Hall on everything they've ever asked me to. I voted for every bond issue." He said, "I just don't like being made a sucker of." He said, "This pothole is what I care about."
And to some extent, all these big complex city issues really miss the point.
Yeah.
If your streets aren't smooth, if the police don't come when you call them, if you don't have a library that you can get into, if your parks are have trash in them and don't serve a community building function, then really, why do you live in a city?
Yeah,
What's
right.
the point of being here?
Right.
You know, and
Right.
there are only so many things that we really need to do
Yeah.
as a city. And right now, you know, there are a lot of facts that you could build the facts that we have the highest municipal tax rate in the region.
Yeah.
And maybe the worst streets, maybe the worst city services, because we had to cut back because of the downturn. It's not because anybody's a jerk or evil. It's just that
Right.
what we've got is very high taxes and very low services. Okay, well, that does make us suckers. That makes us suckers.
Yeah.
Now, we're going to try to fix it. You know, it's an incremental process, and revenue is building slowly, and we'll try to be more judicious about where we spend it. But it's not really invalid to say we've been suckers.
Yeah. And there doesn't seem to be any point in the weave where the buck stops and where you can there's no place for a leader. I don't think the mayor of Dallas is institutionally powerful enough, but there's nobody who can say, look, just as a major point of focus for us, we're going to turn this around, and whatever money we are able to harvest from new revenues and so on, we are going to devote to all of this deferred maintenance. And we're not going to spend it on Calatrava bridges or those kinds of things. Those would be nice, but right now, it's the thing Laura Miller said she was going to do and never did. And maybe she just couldn't. But do you see Back to Basics as having a part in this neighborhood movement that could be potential in the years ahead?
Oh, it's critical. It's critical. And it'll be a drumbeat for me during budgeting this fall. I think there are other members of council who are sympathetic to that. I really do. And I think that we will see a renewed focus on, again, the cliched back to basics, but for real this time. I mean, doing the things that are core city functions, fixing the things the city only owns a few things. It owns some streets,
Right.
and it owns a water system, and it owns some real estate here and there, and it runs a public safety apparatus, which is very important. And if you just take care of the stuff we own first, start with that as a budgeting idea.
Right.
And then if we have money left over, then let's talk about some more creative uses of it.
It seems to be an idea that voters love. You could go back to Laura Miller's first run for mayor and you could ask the question, how on earth would a former Dallas Observer columnist get elected?
That should be a disqualifier just in and of itself.
Yeah, how could somebody with that history get elected mayor? And it was I always thought that her back to basics appeal really resonated with voters enormously. It's just that, when she got in office, she said, well, she was just kidding.
I think it's a little more complex than that. I have some sympathy for Laura.
Yeah, I do too, believe it or not. But I think her tenure does resolve that question of what if we elected a former Dallas Observer columnist mayor?
She's ruined your chance, is what you're saying.
I think we've tried that. And it'll be a while before that fades from memory. How's this? We got a couple minutes. I'm trying to think of what really horrible question I can stick you with.
Yeah, stick me with something bad at the end.
How's this mayor doing?
I would say that as a general proposition, he's doing a really good job. He really believes in inclusiveness and trying to work with the whole council. Now, I can disagree with how he's done it in some instances, but really, especially in comparison to his predecessor, he's much more of an open guy. And I think that his personal commitment, his personal focus on developing Southern Dallas is really resonating with people. I think people believe that he believes that, and I do too. I think he's sincere in his efforts there.
Philip Kingston, District 14, thanks very much for being with us. This is Jim Schutze with Get Off My Lawn. We'll see you next week, same time, same place.
KNON 89.3 FM in Dallas and Fort Worth, the voice of the people.
Business owners, tell KNON's listeners about your business. You can put your business or event on KNON. KNON currently has space available to run announcements for you. Tell KNON's listeners about your goods, services, nightclub, concert, or event. Help keep the voice of the people on the air while putting your information on the air. KNON's been named the #1 radio station in Dallas by both the Dallas Observer and D Magazine. Put your business with Dallas's #1 station. Call now for more information at 214-828-9500, extension 227, or extension 233. For more information, go to KNON.org and click on the Run Spots on KNON page. It's a great way for your business to support community radio while letting more people know about you.